Hey everyone, it's Emily, the Career Catalyst, and this week we have been talking about kind of resources and roundups. Yesterday I talked about how to be an active bystander, and so today I wanted to talk to you about a time I failed to be. This is a really painful experience for me, and I'm really ashamed of it, and I thought it was worth addressing just because I think it's a really common kind of thing that happens to us. So, many years ago, my husband and I were walking around downtown, and this was actually shortly after 9/11. And there was a couple walking kind of in the same area as us, and I don't even remember the details, but they must have been Muslim or presented as Muslim according to everybody else's beliefs. Again, I don't actually remember. And some jerky guy started saying things to them. And my husband, to his credit, actually said, "Hey, don't say that, don't do it." My shame is that I reacted out of self-protection and fear. And I told him not to say anything. I shushed him, and I didn't want to get dragged into it. And afterwards it's really, since then, actually, honestly, it's really bothered me. It's kind of been this shame that I have because I was reacting out of my own fear. I didn't want to get involved. I didn't want us to become targets of this guy. And so I let those people stand alone. And I really shouldn't have done it. And I deeply regret that I did it. And I wish that I had had the internal strength at the time to react differently. But I did what I did. And so what I try to do with that now is kind of roll that into what I can do moving forward. And I think it's kind of our role as anyone who has privilege to really stand up when those things occur. And the two reasons I don't want you to ignore these things when they come up are that, like me, if you ignore it, you will probably have some shame around it. And that's just kind of a crummy thing to have to live with. But more importantly, we are failing to let people know that that's not an okay way to behave. We're failing to let the people who perpetrate those things know that. And we're letting the people who are victims of it just be alone. And so I'm Japanese American, and I know all too well what it's like when people don't stand up for you and say, this is wrong. We can't do this. We shouldn't do this, right? This is the history of Japanese Americans in the US, as well as everyone else, of course. But kind of quite recently in history, people like me were put into US concentration camps, and not very many people stood up and said, that's wrong. You can't treat people like that just because they look like the enemy. And so I'm really ashamed that I didn't take that step with that couple. And if I could find them again, I would apologize to them because that was just cowardice on my part. And there are really kind of two main things that you can do in situations like this. The one that I'm more comfortable with involves more sort of checking in with the people who are kind of being victimized in that situation. So I wish I had actually turned to that couple and said, I'm so sorry. Are you okay? Do you want to go somewhere? We can go get a cup of tea. Really kind of, checked in with them and made them feel safe and heard. Of course, the other option is to confront the aggressor. And I think they're both fine. I think it's really a question of what how you're wired and what you're more comfortable doing. But I also wanted to tell you another story of an intervention that I saw. I'm not embarrassed about anything here because I didn't behave poorly. But years ago, I worked at a university in the career office, and my office was placed immediately next door to the GLBT Student Services office inside the student union. And I was coming back one day from having done some classroom presentation or the other. And the way things were set up, this is kind of long hallway that I walked down to get back to my office. And after I passed a bunch of other things, I eventually passed the LGBTQ office and then got to mine. And so as I was coming up, I sort of had my head in the clouds of, I hope those people email me like they said they would. I hope I answered that person's question, just that kind of stuff that I sort of go through after a public speaking engagement. And so I wasn't really paying very much attention, but I noticed in a sort of peripheral way that in front of me was a group of high school students. And I kind of slowed down because in a group, high school students cannot move quickly. They have to do too much shoving of each other and whatever else. And so I slowed down a little bit and was, again, just not paying attention. But eventually this group of students came to be in front of the LGBTQ office. And I don't even know what they did, but they must have been like laughing, and they're probably, saying the word gay a lot and whatever else they were doing. And when I started paying attention is when suddenly the student staff of that office all came out. And they were wonderful. I'm so impressed with them. I actually wound up kind of stopping and standing there just to sort of bear witness to this, that the director of the office came out as well. But what these students did was so beautiful and so powerful. So they came out and they said to this group of high school students, "Hey, we saw that you were laughing. Can you tell us why you think our office name is funny?" One of them said, "I'm gay, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I don't know why you think that that's a punchline. Can you explain that to me?" And they were so great because they were being very firm. They're sort of drawing a line in the sand that was, my existence isn't funny. I'm not your punchline. Who I am is not less than. It's just me. But they were also being not jerks about it. And I think those high school students were acutely uncomfortable about this because they suddenly realized that this was, these are people that they were talking about. And what I especially liked about this whole intervention was that this high school students, there's, a fairly big group of them, 10 or 15. And just the law of odds is that at least one of those people in that group is someone who is LGBTQI+. And I just love that these college students came out and talked to these folks who were not that much younger than them, but in such an educational way. And I feel like that probably gave any of the high school students in that group, the sense that was actually an okay thing to do and to be. And also I just really liked that they were humanizing something that was really easy for this uncomfortable group of high school kids to joke about. And, they're kids. They didn't really have, I think, any deep malice, but they were uncomfortable with it, and that this was kind of something that had been very stigmatized to them. And so that intervention was really, really nice on the part of the LGBTQI student staff. So I was really impressed with that. And what that brought up to me is just that the notion that there are multiple ways that we can intervene when we see these things happen. Obviously, real ugliness needs to be called out. It's kind of intended as cruel. There's a story online, I think a couple of weeks ago, about someone in a restaurant whose waitress was trans, and this customer called the waitress "it" several times and demanded a real woman. It just was really, really ugly. And in a situation like that, obviously the intervention should be that guy should be removed from the restaurant and not allowed to come back. Same thing with the intentional calling of people by like racial epithets and that sort of thing. But I think fairly often the stuff that we need to intervene on, that we're most called on to be active bystanders to, is not that true ugliness. It's stuff that comes out of a place of fear and ignorance. And I like to think that most people aren't truly ill-intentioned, and so that there's some hope for us to say things that are more educational in nature. And now I'm not a very confrontational person just naturally. And so what I've tended to do since I failed to act on behalf of that couple is I've tended to question people. So I like to think now I would say to the guy who was saying the ugly things to them, I would sort of turn to him and say, why do you think these people are bad? They're just walking around downtown. They seem to be doing nothing more than I'm doing. Or, why do you think whatever that word is that you just used is appropriate? Why is this making you uncomfortable? That kind of question, I think, can be really powerful. And I've known a lot of people who have kind of done a sort of willful ignorance kind of approach to it. Why do you say that? How was that funny to you? And just kind of kept questioning just to make the person a little bit more aware of it. So these are all, a bunch of different kinds of interventions that you can use. I think, again, that it's totally fine just to call out bad behavior, to say, hey, not cool, don't do that, don't say that, whatever. But really, it's a question of what you're comfortable with. And so I'd love to hear your stories of times that you've either acted in these situations or you failed to and learned something from that. So let me know, put that in the comments here, and I hope you all have a fabulous weekend.